Welcome to our 26th podcast. Today we'll be talking about institutional knowledge transfer, tips and tactics. And what's one thing you can do now to ensure you're effectively transferring institutional knowledge? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Thank you for joining us again. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and I am joined by my co-hosts here, Cheryl Volpe. Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, Rich. Good morning. Hi, everyone.
Good morning. And Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben.
Hi, everyone.
And so we're going to be talking today about the transfer of institutional knowledge. And to give a little bit of a backdrop on this, we actually talked about it in our last episode. We thought that we would dive into it a little deeper today. What was it? It was like 2 weeks ago already that I was at this roundtable for manufacturing operations. And it wasn't just one organization talking about this. It was several of them saying, hey, we have a problem. We have these people who really know like everything in the business. Like they know how the sausage is made and all the tips and tricks and how to do things the right way and all the dirty little secrets too. And they want to retire. And how do we retain all of this, that we need, to maintain our culture and keep business rolling, right? So it's a real struggle, right?
Yeah. And especially in industries where you have a lot of knowledge that's very hard to document and get down on paper that someone else who's kind of fresh can pick up and know exactly what to do. A lot of times when you have a very, very tricky kind of a process, there's a machine that's just got to be set right, or it's got to be tweaked a certain way. It's like, I don't know if you guys remember when you were kids and you had a TV and it had the rabbit ears, and you had to tune the rabbit ears just to point them the right way to get the signal for your Saturday morning cartoons, or you had to just kind of bang the side of the TV just right to get it to stop being all fuzzy. It's that kind of stuff that's so hard to document, and it really needs someone to walk a newer person through a process to say you kind of got to get the timing right or the setting just right. And those are the kinds of things I think that we're talking about. Tell me if I'm way off track.
Oh, no, that's right. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And, going way, way, way earlier than rabbit ears, oral traditions in tribes, right? That's why institutional knowledge, another word of it, is tribal information,
Tribal
right?
knowledge. Yeah,
Before we
that's a great
even
point.
had repositories or databases for documentation, those
Right.
oral traditions were so important to keep the culture moving forward.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And you see that in a lot of religions too. I know we don't really talk much about that on our show, but you see a lot of religious traditions have an oral component that goes way back, much earlier than the written component. And that's probably speaking to some of that as well.
Absolutely.
The other thing too, and not to belabor it, but I think it's also not just limited to manufacturing. I think there's a lot of things that people learn in service organizations that are very, very nuanced and tweaks. And I think about someone who I know who's just a master salesperson, and the insights that person had were just mind-blowing. And the knowledge transfer is something that you could never document. How to handle a certain situation, how to handle a certain client, those kinds of things, how to present to a C-suite that's feeling a certain way versus a different audience that's feeling a different way. I mean, we've talked a lot about communication before but it's those kinds of things that it's like almost that sort of tribal elder, the teacher. How do you get that transferred in a way that's more than just picking up the blue book or the 80-page manual? We know that is very challenging to expect people to read that and retain any of it in a meaningful way.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How many people have actually, when you're given a, the employee handbook or some set of instructions, manual, right? Yeah, right. Like even if I'm putting together IKEA furniture, I'm like, I got this, So I'm not reading this
little hex wrench.
Yeah.
That's like, what? I bet you used one of those when you were making those little mini trophies.
Well, in our house, we have the acronym. I wanted to write it down to get it right. One of these is a curse word, so I can't say the whole thing, but it's RTFM. Are you familiar with this? Read the
friggin'
manual.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
it's a thing because, again, like you're saying, the resistance to this level of detail feels tedious. However,
now when we were kids, I'm going to go back to the television thing, because when we were kids, yes, we had rabbit ears, but it was the Atari that we had to really dial in. It was,
wow.
It was this the little box that you had to put on, and you had the UHF station. That thing was really touchy. and there's no way that anybody right now, if I'm explaining this and you had not experienced that you would know what I was talking about. But those who know.
And you were extra motivated for that tweaking, right?
Absolutely. Oh. We'd spend hours just trying to make sure that thing was dialed.
Nothing was preventing that from happening.
That's right. I'm going to play Pitfall whether you like it or not today.
No matter how long it takes me to get this box in the right spot.
Right.
But maybe and I take your jesting, and not to make this all serious and stuff, but maybe that's a good starting point is, Rich, the motivation that you were feeling to get your Atari to work, and to make sure that whoever else you were playing Atari games with could help you get it to work. If they might have a certain way of jiggering the system or whatever, that motivation to play the video game kept you going to fix whatever little thing needed to be fixed. So maybe that's a good entry place to start in terms of, how do we think about knowledge transfer? Well, there has to be some kind of motivation that's motivating to whoever's got the knowledge and wants to transfer it, or doesn't want to transfer it, but is being told they need to transfer it. And then on the receiving end, how does that person be motivated and stay motivated to receive information that may be a little bit weird, a little bit confusing, and the recipe doesn't always go in a linear fashion, and how do we keep that motivation going?
Right. Yeah, I've noticed that you've got some employees that the ones who have the knowledge, right? Sometimes they are really generous, like they just want to show you what is going on, but then you have some resistance on this side, right, where they don't want to learn, or it's too hard, it's too abstract. I get a lot of with software, like how to use this piece of software or something like that, or some kind of technical thing. And then sometimes you have the opposite, where they really, really want to learn, but they don't know how to show them how to learn that stuff. You ever run into that type of thing?
Yeah. And what you're explaining, Rich, is every person brings something different to work, right? Those are all personality traits. Those are inclinations. Those are back to motivation. And so one of the best ways to keep some consistency with the process of knowledge sharing, despite all of those different types of people who are coming into that situation, is through the culture and leadership, right? If it is, and this can be a motivational factor, if it is already a culture where that level of sharing is promoted and budgeted for and of value and part of the mission, then no matter what you're bringing in the door, no matter what your type is, whether it's hard for you to explain things, whether you don't like reading manuals, whether you just don't want to share it, whether you're stingy with that information, or if you're especially generous with it, if the culture has an expectation that those processes will be a part of your behavior in that environment, then it happens more easily. And that's the reason why
Sure.
it's so important in companies that don't have, organizations that don't have that level of expectation can lose that knowledge and not be able to learn from past mistakes or progress past them if they're starting from scratch every time.
Yeah.
Because there is diversity in how people treat that information. And
Sure.
and some of it is fear. The older generation doesn't want to give their job security away. Maybe they want to retire, but they really can't yet. And they're afraid that someone new will force that situation before they're ready.
Which was explicitly expressed at that meeting that I mentioned earlier. So.
Yeah, tell us a little more about that. I mean, what was the conclusion? Did the conversation get up to a point where this is in the room with us now?
Yeah, that's just it. Some of it was really we have our job security. Like, we have referent power, right? So we don't want to relinquish that power. So we have that knowledge. This is keeping me employed, and if I give it to somebody else, then so there's a motivational factor there, right, or lack of, right.
Right.
Yeah, but what I all this talk about motivation, something that comes to mind. Three things come to mind. One, goal setting theory, Locke and Latham goal setting theory, right? Two is Carol Dweck's mindset book. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but the growth mindset, we hear about that in pop culture a lot. And then Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, which is they're all related insofar as if you have a goal and it's a smart goal and it's a worthwhile, purposeful goal, you are motivated to persevere through adversity and challenges, to attain that goal. So you have this. It's not just like I'm based on talent. I am willing to learn new things to get to that goal, right? So, and I'm willing to do whatever I can to overcome obstacles. Maybe that goal is not a learning goal, but maybe it's a goal of transferring knowledge. But overcoming some of my own challenges and some of the other, things that were staying in the way to attain that. What do you think about that type of stuff?
All of these reasons are why purpose is so powerful, right? And that's why no matter what stage of life you're in, if you are seeking answers or direction or definition, and you seek information around that concept, it very often, if not always, all the books you mentioned, which we should put in the show notes, those are such great resources. Purpose, the capital P of purpose, it tends to make us more resilient to persevere those challenges because we are highly motivated, right? Yeah.
For sure.
Can I make a suggestion that we take a little break, take a pause, come back, and then when we come back, maybe Rich and Charlie, we can dig into those three references that you had, explain SMART goals, because I think that was our first acronym about 15 minutes in or so. And
slipped right in there.
7 minutes in. And we should unpack that for people because I think there's a lot of richness in these references and the goals and having a purpose that we should dig into and explore a little bit more. And then maybe we could talk a little bit more about how we take all of that and then start to craft an environment where we have, Cheryl, that psychological safety that you always are so good about reminding us that we need to have, how we create that culture that makes it possible for people to lock into the purpose and not have that fear. What do we think?
I like it.
Synthesizing. Thank you,
Cool.
Ben.
Right on.
All right, I need a
Okay.
break after that.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll be right back.
For Fortune 100 companies and small businesses alike, Harborside Strategy helps design and implement customized precision change management initiatives. From new organizational structures to new processes to new systems, we help you clarify the reason and urgency around your change in language that will resonate across your organization. With that clarity and a common purpose, we use the power of stories and blended communication methods to reinforce your goals and keep everyone focused and aligned. All of it tailored to your people, your organization, your needs. Contact Principal Ben Kleinman today to learn more at www.harborsidestrategy.com. Again, that is www.harborsidestrategy.com.
And we're back. So thank you for joining us again today. We're here with talking about institutional knowledge, and we were going to unpack some of those references that I dropped carelessly in the
Not
first.
at all carelessly. I think you were very intentional about it. I think it was just that there's so much richness in there. Let's dig in and expand on that a little bit more, because
Sure.
I suspect that a lot of folks are like me and don't know the nuances of goal setting theory, that may not know about the growth mindset, that may not know about a book called Grit. So talk a little bit more about those. There may be people that don't know about SMART goals, and so let's explain that acronym.
Sure. Yep. Okay. So
Great.
real quick, I'll try to be as brief as possible on some of this, and then Cheryl and Ben jump in where I
Take your time, do it justice.
I love when you
right
talk
on.
about SMART goals. You touch on it very often, and we never get to dive in on it. So,
Oh yeah, I mean, my capstone was largely based on that, but so goal setting theory, right? Locke and Latham, they have their researchers, IO psychologists, industrial organizational psychologists, who say that if you state purposeful goals, challenging goals, not just cream puff goals, but something that has a challenge to it, you will work towards attaining that goal. And then I don't know if they came up with the acronym of SMART. I'm not exactly sure where that came from. Somebody can let me know, but SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time constrained. So it's very specific, right? It's not a lofty, huge, pie in the sky type of thing. It's something that's very specific. There is a degree of measurability. Can it be done? Can it be done? To what extent can it be done? So that there's some ability for it to be measured.
and how do you know? How do you know when it's done? Right.
And how do you know when it's done?
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That it is attainable. Like it's, there is a realistic ability for you to get it done. It's relevant to what you need to accomplish strategically, right? And then that there is an end time to this, there's, I think, where a lot of people, they don't commit to, we're going to have it done by this time, and that's when it's squishy. It's hard to say, that's going to get done. Did I do that justice?
Excellent.
Oh, good. Yay. Yeah. All right.
Do you find, and if I'm going to take us down a rabbit hole, tell me to put a pin in it and we'll come back to it later. Go. But with SMART goals, do you feel like if it's a really large strategic initiative or some sort of transformation, or if it's something that's very broad, like training an entire workforce on a new piece of software or a new process, do you think that SMART goal could be broken down into lots of mini SMART goals so that time-bound element doesn't become too squishy and trend from Q4 of 2024 to Q3 of 2025 very easily. It sort of gets pushed out. Do you think you could break it down into we're gonna do something very specific, like roll out module 1, and then we're gonna do something very specific, like make sure that 80% of our workforce has viewed module 1 and has tested 70% accuracy in module 1 or something like that?
Yeah.
You're making me think, Ben, and I don't have a lot of personal experience with the agile system, but I feel like that is an outcropping of this basic system of SMART goals. I could be wrong about that, but I know that there's a storming and there's a, fail quick and then an assessment, and that happens on a fairly rigorous pace to keep that squishy time constraint part from getting too, it's impossible to be squishy when you're in the agile system of pace. Have either of you worked with that system before?
Yeah, I have. Rich, do you want to? Do you have thoughts or comments?
Go right on ahead.
It might not be exactly relevant to this, and we don't have that. Could be the rabbit hole.
It's actually, I think it's worth the discussion on this, because the agile methodology, when you're working through these sprints, I think compartmentalizes what Ben you're talking about here, where there is this section to get to a
goal, intermediate goals, right?
Yes, but it's the minimally viable product, the MVP, right? So you're getting to it's an iterative process, is what it is. There's these different iterations of what you're trying to accomplish. So it is very goal focused. It is very compartmentalized over a brief period of time. It depends. I mean, largely, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like 2 weeks or something like that for a sprint.
I've seen, yeah, I feel like most of the places where I've seen Agile being used trend to that sort of 2-week sprint period. And so you spend 2 weeks focused on a very discrete set of activities that have a very, very natural, describable start point, a very natural, measurable, describable endpoint, and you spend those 2 weeks however you need to get that piece of work done. So, sort of an easy example is we're going to put a new button on a website page. That button needs to be sort of rectangular. It needs to be blue, and the text on the button needs to be white. All the work to get that done, we're not talking about what the button actually does. Is it clickable? All that, we're setting that aside for the future. All we're doing is getting the blue button with white font in a rectangular format on the website. And so it's very clear. There's no button now. 2 weeks from now or 1 week from now, there's going to be a blue button. And someone else who has decided they want that button is going to validate that the button is there and it looks the right way. And so it's very measurable. It's time bound. In theory, it's moving you towards that strategic part of it. And so it does fit into that SMART thing. I think where I've seen Agile get a little bit fuzzy is that you have these very, very nice discrete work packages that you sort of sprint along, but it always feels like there's not always, but often it feels like there's never an end, because it's always this iterative kind of process. And so you sort of loop through and loop through and loop through, and the whole idea is that you're starting with something and you very quickly get some nugget of functionality and you just expand on that functionality. And so you're very quickly building from a minimum viable product, like Rich said, into something that's much bigger and more functional and has all sorts of options built into it. But it's very hard to get to an end state with that, where someone says, this is good enough, this is done, we're going to stop doing this sprint effort or this agile effort. We've got something, we're going to get it out the door, we're going to sell it, and we're going to call that version 1 and be done with it. And that's where I think agile practitioners seem to struggle a little bit, and that end state sort of gets lost a lot of the time.
So interesting. So they're the attraction to the system could be that you're seduced by this idea of these sprints of satisfaction where you're hitting all these deadlines. But then back to the SMART model, that time constrained isn't really a thing at the end.
Well, you have lots of little SMART goals, mini projects, if you will, and they all get done, and they're all very good. But that longer term is very hard to get that to be time bound. And I think it's also hard for people to plan around that, because in a grand scheme, you might say we need product X or service Y to be done by June 30th, and you're sometime January 1st, but you never know if you're actually going to get there. From a project planning perspective,
Interesting.
it's very hard to plan linearly when you're focused on these micro week or 2 week kinds of sprints. And so there's all kinds of interesting tensions there, and that might be a show in and of itself, but that's just been my experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like you become a change junkie. Like we gotta make this little tweak or whatever. And it's interesting because it is a project management methodology, right? So it's supposed to have an initiation phase, a planning phase, an execution phase, a monitoring and controlling phase, and a closing phase, right? So it should go through those 5 phases of the Project Management Institute's body of knowledge. But what ends up happening is, like you said, it's like, oh, but we can't close this because we want to make it a little better, and we want to make it a little better, or hey, can we do this or whatever. So that's really interesting. In the context of this institutional knowledge part, right? It would be great if you had, a project where it is document or train or something to that effect, right? On these specific skills, right? From a manufacturing standpoint, for instance, like how do I set up a CNC mill to have to do a setup, right? So let's just put it that way. Like I'm going to set up a piece to be manufactured, right?
Can you explain CNC?
It's compute. Shoot, I can't remember.
I stumped the DJ.
You stumped me. So basically, what it is, it's a automated manufacturing process, right? Where it is based on data that you put into the machine, so it automatically goes and does it. Instead of manually done, you program it to hit certain parameters, right?
Computer numeric control. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you very much. Yeah. But so you have to know how, and there are nuances to this, right? Like you can't just go in and say, "Oh, I'm just going to have the machine set it up," because that doesn't work that way. I learned that last month. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to have some skill in how to adjust the machine to certain tolerances. So if you have a goal of, by the end of this month, we are going to actually the training program I just went through, right? 96 hours of how do we actually learn how to attain this chunk of knowledge, right? It's motivating. In my opinion, from what I've seen, and I think the evidence backs this up, that you are motivated to continue to learn as you are rewarded with the attainment of that goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, some dopamine, some endorphin rush there with that attainment.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Biologically, we're like, it's the checklist, right? Like, woo, I got that. That's that dopamine hit.
Yeah, that dopamine.
That's right.
It's like in Asana when the unicorn goes flying by, that complete button, right?
Asana is a project management tool.
Yeah.
I just want a pin that says change junkie. I want that change junkie pin that you just brought up.
There you go. Hey, if you make change your friend, you too can become a change junkie.
There you go.
I would like to go back to the beauty of the documentation within the Agile system. And I just want to bring it back to institutional knowledge. I had a conversation with a very successful controller person yesterday. She started her own company in her 20s, just doing books for other small companies and friends. And she just got really, really, really good at it. And she grew her own company. And she has built it. She said she was a natural, she documented everything, even in her 20s. Like I said, she started. And because she was able to document all of her lessons learned with all of her tools, such as QuickBooks and P&L and balance sheets and all these things, she documented everything she did. She had that presence of mind at that age. She was able to bring people on into her company, train them easily with that documentation, and grow, and then move herself up the decision-making ladder. So
Sure.
I wonder, just leaving Agile behind for a moment, if it's not documented, which brings us back to institutional knowledge in different types. There's tacit and explicit, right? The explicit is the documented. It's the processes. It's the things that you're talking about, setting up the machine with the proper. And then that tacit is all of that, like we were talking last episode, the cultural stuff that is often unwritten and unspoken.
Sure.
So just trying to bring it back to the modern challenges with that knowledge, the transfer of the institutional knowledge or memory. Institutional memory is another way to look at it. So, yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Well, I was just so here's something to consider. It's when you have a franchise or when you're looking to sell a business, right? It is those processes. It's the how things are done and how things are made. It's all of that stuff that's kind of the secret sauce that adds the value, right? And when you don't have that, it devalues everything. I mean, literally, when you look at like Shark Tank or these other programs about business valuation, the profit, right? They're all looking at the systems, like how is everything done? How efficient is it? Are we making money, and are we controlling our costs, right? And how all that's done is you have some skills, right? And those skills are hard to it's beyond just documentation, because the skills have to be learned, internalized, practiced, right? And when you don't have that,
muscle memory.
Yeah, right. Muscle memory is a big part of it,
right?
I mean, that's
in entertainment.
And how does that get valued?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Ben?
Sorry, Cheryl. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, in entertainment, you hear a lot about IP. It's relatable, right? Intellectual property is that, what distinguishes this company, what was, originally hewn by that owner, what was that creative idea that no one else had before you, that we know of.
Yeah.
That's the value of the IP.
Yeah. Well, there's a theoretical physicist, Michio Kaku, who talks about the future of lots of different things, science and all this, but he does talk about business sometimes. And one of the things he talked about was that and I wholly believe in this, that the currency of the future is really intellectual capital, right? It is that IP, the systems, it's all of that is knowledge, skills, abilities that are organizationally the assets of the company.
Which is different than KPIs.
Yeah.
Which stands for?
Knowledge.
Key performance indicators.
Key performance indicators. Ding, 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 ding. We need a little bell. Can you machine us, Rich, with your fancy CNC
a little
skills? Can
little
you
bell. Every
do a
time
little
a
bell?
little acronym comes up, we ring
Yeah,
the
we
bell.
just do the ding, 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 ding. You know, like at the Olympics when the gold medalists would ring the bell around the track.
There you go.
Give a little
Yeah.
ding, 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 ding. Just a little one.
I have a cowbell.
Teeny little string for a rope.
My cowbell.
I was gonna say, I'm sure somewhere in this room I'm in right now, I'm in our music room. You can't see that, which is a good thing because it is a mess back here. But
No guitar
somewhere
signed
I
by
have
you.
no, nothing like that. No. But plenty of instruments. So I'll see what I can find for you.
All right. there
I'm
you
not gonna machine something.
That'll be our assignment. Let's all bring a bell next time.
Well, why don't we do this? Because we're
So
kind
we
of
can
coming
show
up
it
on.
with bells on. Now it's time for a break. We got to go there
Yes, yeah, we've taken
before we
it
go
there.
into bad dad
It's
joke
time for
territory.
break.
Right. When we come back, let's bring this around to maybe talking about some specific things that an organization might do to transfer some of this. It's not going to be complete by any stretch, but we'll make an attempt. So we'll be right back.
Are you struggling with high employee turnover, low morale, or poor communication within your team? Do you find it challenging to foster collaboration and trust among your employees? Do you have resistance to some of the recent changes you've made in your business? You're not alone. According to sources such as Forbes and the Society for Human Resources Management, many business owners face these same challenges. They know that success comes from a strong workplace culture, but they don't always know where to start. If this sounds like you, it's time to take action. Our experienced consultants stand ready to work with you to develop customized solutions. Don't wait any longer. Take our quick culture scorecard today and discover where you can improve. Work Balance Consulting, where workplace culture meets success. Visit our website at www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard and start your journey toward a better workplace today. Again, visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard.
And we're back. So let's bring this back home, like we said, about institutional knowledge transfer, maybe some tactics. I know we didn't get wholly into like mindset and grit and stuff, but that's what we could talk about. I mean, there's lots of stuff to talk about that we opened Pandora's box today. But what are some things that come to mind in terms of, helping companies to navigate this?
I brought up already that culture from the leadership, or it doesn't always even have to be the leaders. It could be that front line who takes that extra time to share with the newer people about this or that. But
Sure.
the decision makers have to invest in certain tools within that culture to make it easier, which is the repository, the database, some system where this information can be stored, and then the time and the expectation and even a reward system around using that, which includes training. So there's an investment there that has to be valued.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
I think for me, one of the key things that we've talked a little bit about is the motivation. And each company is going to have to figure out what is going to motivate their people. And it may be that different groups are motivated differently to transfer knowledge, to intake knowledge, or to learn that knowledge and to practice it and sustain it. And maybe there's a refinement or improvement component of that, but there has to be some kind of motivation, which takes us back a little bit to the SMART goals, Rich, that you were talking about, and to some of the growth theory, growth mindset theory that we didn't get into a lot, but I think there has to be some of that. And that's something that becomes very institutionally specific. It's hard to say every company is going to be motivated, the same way.
Right.
You often hear about money as the great motivator, and sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. And so it's going to be one of those things that each culture is going to be unique enough that they're going to have to figure out what that motivation package looks like.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think there are some ways that we can motivate those, the light bearers, the people who have that knowledge, right? The fire keepers, whatever, whatever you want to term them. If one thing that came up was like a train the trainer type of thing, where you're actually giving them the tools to learn how to be a trainer, how to be a mentor, which I think there's some degree of like self-efficacy or self-confidence that they need to have. That maybe that's one of those demotivating factors for them is I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to teach somebody, so that they're kind of reluctant to do it because they don't have those skills. But I think there's some degree of empowerment that they get when you can say, "Hey, look, you can do this. Let me help you." So I've seen that type of thing happen, and that kind of taps into this something I talked about in the last episode where we have Erik Erikson's life cycle theory, right? And so at this stage of life, beyond 40 up until about retirement age, we have this thing called generativity versus stagnation. So generativity is I am going to bestow this knowledge to the younger generations, right? Otherwise, I'm going to stagnate, and I'm not going to grow, and the society doesn't grow either, right? So I think tapping into some of that train to trainer type of thing is one tactic. The other thing that comes to mind that's kind of related to that, and going to what Cheryl you were talking about with leveraging technology, is we now have the ability to have video and learning management systems that we never had before, and COVID really brought a lot of this to the forefront where,
And I think that in a really interesting kind of parallel or I'm striking out on the word, but a really interesting component that has also become relatively new or newly acknowledged is that different people learn in different ways and different people train in different ways. And so the idea that having just a manual is going to do it for the entire company is no longer we know that's not the best way to help bring new people on or transfer knowledge or retain knowledge. And so, Rich, that kind of complements is the word I think I'm looking for, this complement of different ways to train people. We've talked before in prior episodes about having lots of different mechanisms of communication.
Yeah.
Parallels this growing knowledge and proof that people learn differently and need different ways to hear knowledge, retain knowledge, kind of explore knowledge, expand their knowledge, all of that. I'll stop.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, no, that's right.
Ben, you reminded me of gamification too, right? So that is actually a type of learning that is also just really been prominent as our online lives evolve, and gaming is just such a huge part of our culture now. There are people that learn best through, and it's not to go back to agile, but that dopamine rush, that badge.
I thought you were going to say that go back to Atari.
Yeah. Well, there's that. But
Gamification.
Yeah, I know.
You're absolutely right, Cheryl. You're absolutely right. And there's a whole branch of study that looks at nudging people to behave in different ways or creating a default that sort of does the right thing or the thing that you want people to do and makes it easy for them to opt in and makes it harder for them to opt out. So there's that as well.
Ooh, that's a little Pavlovian, isn't it?
My mustache
I was
roll
waiting. But yeah, and I really
I have a client that I've worked with that I helped them and put together an LMS, learning management system, for training their employees, and they employ that gamification where when they complete, there's like 3 parts, and then there's a final exam, right? And so every time they complete a section, they get a badge, and and you can put that badge up on LinkedIn and all that, so it does keep people motivated, because after they collect all 3, then it unlocks the final exam, and they get the final.
They get the Change Junkie Award.
Yeah, right.
Well, this happened to you recently, didn't it, Rich? You got a top voice badge.
That was that. Yeah, I was like, I'm.
And well done, sir.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, but I was like, I'm at like 9% of, like in the top 9%, and I'm like, I need to get to that 4%. I'm going to get that badge. So
did you just say cowbell, Cheryl?
I did. I said more cowbell for you, Rich.
Ring the bell.
You were highly motivated. So
yeah,
yeah.
And I think so. We could. I mean, there are those traits that people have that and we got to tap into that, because every individual is different too, right? So, like you said, Ben, like what channels do we use? What methods do we use for training? Not that we can completely individualize all of that, but we certainly can find technologies and methodologies that speak to the audience in the way that they need to learn.
Yeah, and as the neurodivergent studies and research come to light more, that is just such another huge burst of new ways of training and optimizing people who are bringing different skill sets to the environment. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think where all that is making me go is that we're going from a single mechanism of knowledge transfer and methodology of knowledge transfer, that manual, the printed manual that you hand out to someone, to a menu of options. And so we're sort of we're creating this optionality in terms of how knowledge is transferred, how knowledge is documented, how knowledge is shared. And I think that speaks to where we are as a culture and recognizing a lot of different learning styles and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it makes things a lot more complicated in some ways to build that menu, to build the right menu, to keep the menu fresh, to keep the menu current and evolving in the right ways.
Right. Yeah. There's an investment in equity. It can be expensive, but everyone has to agree that it's worth it.
Yeah. But if we look at it, just some of the consumer products that are out there, right, where we've had historically, we talked about IKEA earlier, right, where you've had just these manuals that say, this is how we do this, right? But now they have QR codes that lead or web links that lead to videos that show you step by step how to do this stuff. So
it's like everybody who wants to do anything, a home improvement project, just YouTube's now, or goes to your favorite video source and looks up, how do I fix a stove, or how do I repair a fridge? And you type in the model number and the serial number, and there's like 8,000 people training you on how to do that.
That's right. Yeah.
But they still require some institutional knowledge. I mean, I have looked at a lot of those trying to fix our stove. There's that, like, bang the side of the TV, get the rabbit ears pointed the right way. There's a lot of that. And so it's not just watch the video.
Yeah. 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 There is definitely a practicum part, right? So, we do not have time for me to get into Kirkpatrick's model of training, but there is, after this knowledge, like if you're training somebody, right, they need to have a positive reaction. They need to show that they've gained knowledge, right? But then you have to reinforce that knowledge through practice, behavior. So this is the behavior side of it, right? So they need to practice it, on the job training, reinforcement through rewards, coaching. that type of stuff, and then all that gets tied to performance. But, well, I guess I just did.
Well, we don't need another
Like a
episode for
master
it.
class in org dev theory. You guys are so awesome.
30 seconds there, but no, that's just it. You need to practice it. You need to reinforce it, because just learning it, we don't have the cognition necessarily to just download it like the Matrix. We're not going to be kung fu fighting.
Thought about that so many times. I'm like, where's my socket? I need to do this quickly.
Right.
But you bring us back.
Not yet. Won't Gen AI or artificial general intelligence solve all that?
Oh,
Sometimes.
Ben. Why? Like, how far
45
are we
minutes
this?
into our episode, and I'm going there.
You're going there.
But it can't.
Maybe that's another episode.
It can't fix your stove, Ben. I really need to know, was it gas or electric, and how did that work out?
Tune in next time.
Little cliffhanger.
It worked out well, and I probably took 3 times longer than a trained stove repair technician would have taken. And I probably made about 4 or 5 trips to the local hardware store, whereas a trained person would have made 1.
Mm-hmm.
Or come with the right product ahead of time. And it was a gas stove.
Okay.
It was very much a learning experience. It was not a good development experience. I have no desire to keep doing that.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Any gas stove repair that you can walk away from is a good one.
And still have your house.
Wow, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for naivete, I think.
You're good.
You're good.
Right on.
On that note.
On that, yeah. So let's wrap this up. So thank you all for showing up today, for listening to us banter about institutional knowledge. I hope you got some value out of it. Who wants to take this out today? Cheryl, I think you're up today.
All right. Thank you, listeners. I know that we covered a lot of things that were outside institutional knowledge, but very much like psychological safety and communication and change, it all fits into that umbrella. So thank you for listening. See you next time. Make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.